Like a majority of PlayStation players, there has only been one game dominating my evenings throughout the last month. A game so massive that even after 30 hours of playtime, I have barely scratched the surface of what lies underneath. I think about it at work. I think about it at the gym. Hell, I even think about it in bed. Ew, no, not like that, you disgusting pervert. Guys, the script says it's going to be playing the Ragnarok trailer in the background.
Yeah, that's what we've got.
Well, that's not what I'm talking about. Okay, first things first. I have, of course, been playing Ragnarok since its launch last month, and yeah, it's fantastic. It's everything I remember about the 2018 game, just improved upon in pretty much every aspect. But what I didn't anticipate was that I'd spend every evening with an internal struggle about what disc was going to be in my console.
I know what I have to do, but I don't know if I have the strength to do it.
Let me provide some context. Towards the end of October, I decided to download The Division 1 again. I say again because I had originally played it back at release on my Xbox One at the time, but I never really knew what I was getting into. You see, I had never really experienced a looter shooter before, and so I wasn't prepared for the heavy focus on gear and the constant grind to better my character's build. From memory, I never got far into the game after the opening few hours, and so it faded into memory. Since then, I've always wanted to try the game again, to see whether or not this time it'd click. And boy did it. Long story short, I got pretty addicted to The Division for the next few weeks, to the point where I'd managed to convince a mate that it was worth a purchase. I could show him the ropes, help him quickly push through the early game due to my higher level, and we'd be having a grand old time. And then he suggested buying the fucking Division 2 instead.
But you can't do this to me. You know how much I sacrificed?
But you know what? I'm so glad he convinced me to start fresh on the sequel, because it's an absolutely phenomenal game. So, what is The Division or The Division 2 even about? The general premise is that a virus transferred through the use of currency has decimated the United States. The resulting chaos has led to major cities falling to rioters and larger gangs, and so the US government has awoken Division sleeper agents to restore order. You take control of one of these agents.
Inhabitants of Peach Trees, in case you people have forgotten, this block operates under the same rules as the rest of the city. Mama is not the law. I am the law.
The Division 1 takes place in New York City around Christmas time, whereas its sequel moves to Washington, D.C. during the following summer. Now, this video is predominantly going to be discussing the sequel, but I do want to say right off the bat that New York was pretty much the ultimate setting for the first game.
I gotta tell you, it was perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
Whilst Washington has provided with some really, really beautiful environments and famous locations to explore within it, it's yet to ever match the cold and harrowing atmosphere I felt when I was exploring the Big Apple. It's also immediately worth mentioning that if you're thinking of going into either Division games, it's not an experience that thrives on its narrative, because there really isn't one. Or at least one you could get invested in. I could not tell you a single name of any character I've met in the hours spent playing The Division 2, outside of Agent Kelso, who, to be honest, I've entirely forgotten how my character first met her, or even why she's still showing up in the cutscenes. And don't be fooled by these cutscenes either. They are very few and far between.
But we have our own problems, and they are big problems.
The reason you play The Division 2 is for its fun gameplay and addicting gear game. As a third-person shooter, I can confidently say that it's probably one of the most solid feeling ones I've ever played. From the way that individual weapons handle to the movement between cover, it never feels too sluggish or lacking in weight either. The majority of the game takes place in the free-to-explore open world, which is entirely PvE against the game's AI. And I say free-to-explore because it is totally open to roam the map by player choice, outside of a few locked endgame areas. But it is worth mentioning that specific areas of the city will hold enemies of higher level at the beginning, and obviously higher difficulty. In this space, you can take part in lengthy main missions, shorter side missions, and random activities on the streets, like saving hostages or disabling propaganda broadcasts. Completing these will reward you with new loot, as well as upgrades for friendly settlements spread across the city. These settlements then provide the player with new missions and gear unlocks. Now, as I've said already, loot is the whole game here. Pretty much anything you do in this game will lead to obtaining loot, whether that's through mission rewards, enemies dropping equipment, or simply scavenging within the environment. And let me say this, when I tell you the Division 2 has a lot of guns, I mean it has a lot of f***ing guns. Assault rifles, SMGs, shotguns, semi-autos, snipers, all the standard categories you'd expect. But even as I was hitting the max level of the base game, I was still picking up unique guns that I had never seen before.
It's a pretty cool sidearm you got there. What is it?
I don't know what it's called. I just know the sound it makes when it takes a man's life.
Every weapon type feels well balanced. Assault rifles are your all-round... Assault rifles are your all-rounder, good in pretty much any scenario. SMGs and shotguns are devastating up close, but will suffer at long range. LMGs are powerful when fired in long sustained barrages, but kick more than a pissed off horse when fired in bursts. And snipers are, well, snipers. And all of these can be customized with attachments and skins to your heart's content. And unlike Modern Warfare, adding cool looking attachments doesn't make your gun handle like ass. It just makes it better.
That's what I'm talking about!
The same applies to your gear. Body armor, knee pads, gloves, holsters, masks, and backpacks all contribute to your agent's overall stats, and mixing between the different brand sets to obtain bonuses that suit your exact playstyle is incredibly satisfying. And one brilliant feature the Division 2 allows is the ability to change the look of any gear pieces you choose, so that you can benefit from the best stats possible, but still prioritize the cosmetic aspect rather than settle for a less than desirable outfit. Like Cyberpunk at launch.
What the fuck is that?
Once you've decided on your loadout and how fly you want your agent to look,
Yes, that is how you wrap a son of a bitch in wool. Now, if somebody asks you who you're wearing tonight, what do you say?
I'm wearing Schmidt.
Hey,
Yeah.
it's time to kill some bad guys.
They have eyes on Wilson.
I've got to say that story missions are a bit of a mixed bag in the Division 2, as they provide some of the coolest environments and scenarios in the game, such as fighting through different themed exhibits in the Natural History Museum, or through abandoned subway tunnels. But the things you do in these missions very rarely deviate from enter room, shoot everyone, access a terminal, enter a new room, then rinse and repeat. It's just lacking in terms of objectives to complete. Give me some cool gameplay mix-ups like a hazardous leak in the building we're in, so it's a race against the clock to escape. Or the power goes off and we have to rely on night vision or flashlights to make sense of the dark surroundings. Or having to chase a rogue agent through the city streets and it's a mission failure if we lose them. Put simply, the environments of the story missions you fight in are really cool. The things you do in them, not so much. The same argument could be easily made for the side missions and other random activities, so the enjoyment factor really does come down to how fun the combat is. Luckily, the AI in this game are quite formidable and do very well to apply pressure on you and your team. There have been plenty of occasions where myself and 2 squad mates have found ourselves in a tight spot, completely outgunned, and being dropped faster than someone on the receiving end of Deontay Wilder's glove. I wouldn't say the enemy variety is incredibly noticeable in terms of visual design. Instead, it's found more in the use of special weaponry like explosive arrows or this weird slime gun that quickly locks you in place. Though, you do get some separation between the regular fodder and tankier armoured enemies where you'll need to chip off individual pieces before you can start doing any real damage, or specialist types who can deploy equipment in the field against you like these exploding RC cars. Oh, and you do get the occasional suicide bomber. To help balance the numbers game, Division agents have access to skills. These are cool pieces of tech which can be deployed either offensively or defensively. For example, my two skills of choice are a mobile sentry turret which can be thrown out onto any surface and directed to focus fire on specific targets, and a seeker mine which will roll across the battlefield until it stops by its target's feet and proceeds to vaporize them.
Excuse me, what the actual fuck?
Other options can include a riot shield, a combat drone, environmental scanners, and so on. The combination of weapons, gear, and skills means that the Division 2 can offer so much variety in your approach to combat that, when playing with friends, synergizing your build so that each member can provide a particular role is so satisfying. Speaking of friends, the Division 2 massively increases enjoyment when playing online co-op. I wouldn't say it's impossible to enjoy it solo, given I was playing the first game entirely on my own, and I still will occasionally do solo sessions now. But like any shooter, having a couple of buddies to back me up, provide covering fire for flanking options and last minute saves, as well as allow for revives instead of an instant failure on death, is always a welcome benefit.
NANI?!
There is still one major element of the game I'm yet to cover, and it's possibly my favourite aspect of the entire experience.
Transmissions jammed. Proximity coverage only.
For me, the Dark Zone is where the Division 2 hits its sweet spot. 3 walled-off areas of the map that combine the PvE element of the main game with the added danger of PvP. This is where you can grab some very high-level loot at the risk of a much tougher fight. Contextually, these zones are areas of the city where the virus hit hardest, and so there are no civilians present and no allied AI to help you out in a pinch. Immediately stepping into these zones, the atmosphere just tightens around you. Your senses escalate as every movement in the distance, every sound heard could be a very dangerous threat. Enemies are much tougher both in their damage dealt and how much punishment they can take. And hostile players can choose to go into rogue status in order to ambush and attack unsuspecting agents. Spread out across the Dark Zone are landmarks, points of interest overtaken by enemy AI, and these are basically concentrated engagements where you can ensure a decent gear drop once you've cleared a few waves of enemies and killed the boss. There will be random patrols of AI wandering the streets of the Dark Zone, but these are less likely to drop as many rewards, so you want to prioritize the landmarks where you can.
Incoming cargo plane with Dark Zone drop.
Occasionally, DZ drops will suddenly appear on the map, and these are timed objectives where crates are dropped to specific points in the Dark Zone. The second the drop is announced, it's an all-out scrap fest for whoever in the server can reach the crate first and access its treasure.
We happy?
Yeah, we happy.
Less bombastic ways to gather loot include scavenging the environment for weapon and gear caches,
Now detecting contaminated gear.
or by finding a Dark Zone chest. Dark Zone chests will require Dark Zone keys to open, and these can be acquired through normal play, but if you don't have one at the time or want to risk it, you can instead break open the box at the cost of acquiring a rogue status. We'll get to this bit shortly. All gear picked up in these spaces are considered contaminated, so you can't simply walk out the Dark Zone with your shiny new rifle and armor pieces. When you have filled your limited inventory space, you will need to extract them by chopper. To do so, you will need to get to one of the designated extraction points, send out a flare for the chopper, and await its arrival. Here is where the Dark Zone gets its most heart-pounding.
Chopper inbound at this time.
Because you have just announced to the whole zone that you are attempting to extract some very juicy pieces of equipment, AI and players alike. So the next few minutes can become a battle to survive until you can attach your loot to the chopper and get it out safely. If you die at any point in the Dark Zone, all the contaminated gear you have acquired will be dropped, and you'll need to quickly respawn at a nearby checkpoint to then hurry back before it is swiped up by another greedy player. Look, in case you're worried that the Dark Zone is essentially a place for rampant griefing, then don't be deterred, because this is where the rogue status comes in. You see, if a player desires to engage in the PvP, they must hold down a button to go rogue. In doing so, a red skull icon will appear by their name. This alerts any player who spots them that they are indeed hostile. And fortunately, you are not required to also go rogue in order to defend yourself. So if you see a red skull, just do what I do and don't hesitate.
Nearby agent has gone rogue.
What this means is that when bumping into another player who isn't rogue, you're not immediately thrust into some sort of standoff. And the likelihood is you can both go your separate ways without any bloodshed. Though it's always worth being cautious in case they suddenly activate the rogue status. Would you shut up? That being said, it's also very common to forge alliances with other players trying to clear a landmark or during a public extraction. In fact, one of my most memorable moments was this huge shootout between myself and 5 friendly players versus a massive squad of AI enemies fighting for control of a DZ drop. I think that's pretty much covered all my thoughts on The Division 2 so far. I hope that in the midst of all my incoherent rambling, that my genuine excitement and admiration for this game has come through correctly. I know for a fact that I still have a ton of things I haven't mentioned, having only recently hit the level cap and about to transition into the endgame content. So this is something I think I'll be playing for a good portion of 2023. Hell, this game already made it into my top 5 most played games of 2022. And I only installed it in November. Hey guys, thanks again for watching this video. As always, if you're new to the channel and enjoyed what you saw, then why not consider subscribing using the button below? And if you really enjoyed it, then I gratefully appreciate a thumbs up, as it lets me know that I'm doing the right thing and keeping you entertained. As this will be my last video of the year, I hope you have a great end to 2022, and I'll see you in 2023. Until next time, take care, goodbye.